one another. And that's the whole point of the collaboration. So in particular, so Serge, so we're going to touch on everything. I do want to thank you for the idea around talking about not climate change, but the changing climate. It's those simple little nuances in the sharing and the communication that really make a difference. In the planning field, we've been talking about sustainability for years, and everybody, as soon as you say that word now, people fall asleep, don't want to talk about it, but they will talk about healthy communities. Kind of the same thing, but anyway. So it is about how we couch it and how we communicate it. Thank you. And it was good to have Jamie here as well, talking about the local situation. It becomes a topic of hot conversation when the Lawrence Street was closed, and that happened. So it's really good to have the outline of what the town has done and what the plans are to keep it going. And very excited to know that those retention ponds are going to be kind of that extension of the recreation services. So it's not only providing the infrastructure, but it also provides something for the community as well. Adam, I had no idea how you guys actually built the wetlands. So that was actually really cool from a very technical point of view, understanding that the plants are as important as the hole and the water retention itself. And Adam Cheeseman, I have been involved in and seen some of the work that he's done in the past. So it's always good to know that there are quote-unquote free ways of dealing with some of the issues that we're dealing with. We don't always have to go for the most expensive engineering solution as we go. So it's been great. And Amanda, all the work that EOS does has really, and the bringing it right down to the individual level and what we can do, I think is really important for all of us in terms of dealing with this really big issue of changing climate. So anyway, we're going to open it up. If anyone has any questions from the audience, just raise your hand and all right, we'll start with it.
This is for Serge. It's a bit of information rather than a question as such. Okay. Can you just explain the difference between weather and climate? We all deal with weather every day, and we're talking about climate. They are not the same thing.
I thought that maybe the meteorologist should answer that. And so again, weather kind of creates your climate, I guess. Weather is what's happening every day, is what you see outside your window. But climate, I guess I would see it as being, how does it affect the people that are here or on the ground, and I guess a trend on what seems to be happening. That's how I would explain it. I might not separate the two, I guess, when we talk to just normal people, but that'd be my best guess at that, I guess.
No, it's just a matter of term. Weather would be the next 7 days, 7 to 10 days. Climate is a decade to 3 decades long. And I think that's the simplest way. Just when people are talking about climate change and that, and quite often they just refer to the weather we're having today. So it becomes important that distinction is understood, I think.
Great point, I agree.
Yeah, Donald Trump actually just did that thing.
Yeah.
So anyway, yes, we do need to make that distinction. Mike.
Question for perhaps Serge or Jamie, I don't know. Trying to get a handle on the changing climate, to use the engineering term. In realistic terms, we're changing infrastructure in Sackville because of the Lawrence Street situation, and we also had discussions about concrete, etc. What does that mean in concrete terms when we talk about perhaps the volume of a storm sewer? You know, we've gone from a 500 millimeter pipe to we have to make it 10% bigger, 50% bigger, 100% bigger, and what does that mean in dollars and cents? If you care to elaborate a little bit on that to give some people some numbers of what it represents.
Okay, I'm just going to repeat it for the camera, for the video. So the question basically is, so what are the actual engineering changes, and I'll give it to Jamie so he can talk about Lawrence Street in terms of what it means from going from what used to be the 1 in 100 year predictive infrastructure to now what they're doing and what's the cost like?
Yeah, thanks, Mike. I don't know what the specific cost would be, but in terms of the engineered design, it's the, Sarah, correct me if I'm wrong, but 100-year storm plus 15 to 20% for climate change is what we've designed for certainly on Lawrence Street. So I don't know in terms of what size pipe that would be. I guess it would be context driven depending on where it is. We have, on the Lawrence Street project, we have a lot of culverts and a lot of different size culverts depending on where they are and how the stormwater is expected to move throughout the drainage basin. But in terms of the overall engineer design, it's a 100-year storm plus 15 or 20%, one of the two. Where, 15, 20 years ago, that extra wiggle room for climate change wouldn't have been in the calculation at all.
So similar to what Jamie has said, when I was in Dieppe, we had added 20% just over the top on what we were designing on new infrastructure. So 20% meaning not necessarily 20% bigger pipes, but 20% more rainfall on your design numbers. Now, it does bring extra cost, but even before that, Mike, is you need to look at a plan on how we're going to look at that. So even if your pipes are small underneath the road, the rest of the water is going to run on top of the road. So you need to look at plans and details on where that water is going to, and that drop of water is going to end up. And then you can build a pond. This is what we've been doing too when I was in Dieppe. We have many stormwater retention ponds to help mitigate this water downstream. And then where you invest the money is you try to make a plan. Now, I'll give you a good example, try to keep it short. We had 50 major culverts in the city of Dieppe, so we have a plan to replace one per year. They last 50 years. So you pick the ones on the list that are more crucial, that are more vulnerable to this changing climate, and then that's the one you invest in, and then when you rebuild it, you build it to the right size for 20% more. And you keep on going year after year. So you invest more when you do the work, you try not to do it all at once, and you try to pick the ones that are most vulnerable and that are the most pressing for the people that are around them. So you make a plan on that, and then you can at least adapt as humanly possible, being financial constraints. So I guess that's the idea. But for cost-wise, sure, that culvert that I'm replacing will be more expensive than it would have been if it was the same one. And while you do have issues like Lawrence Street, it's a bigger project. We've had projects in Dieppe, $8 million raising a road because, 3/4 of the city runs on that road every day. So it eventually becomes a financial issue, and if the citizens want that type of project, then that's what we go with.
Thank you. Eric?
I wonder if you could speak to the question of what the municipalities might do with regard to zoning, keeping houses out of the vulnerable areas, and also building code, which usually the municipalities don't get involved with regard to not allowing basements any longer. I mean, the insurance industry has clearly said that's where the big cost is. The illustrations were very clear. If you didn't have a basement in all those illustrations, you wouldn't have had the flooding problem. So what's the municipalities or the province doing on any of those?
Is something I'm supposed to answer?
You're the planning commission.
All right, so I work at the Regional Service Commission, which does the land use planning for all but the Tri-Cities. From a zoning perspective, in Sackville, what we have is basically an overlay zone. It's a hydrographic layer on the map, so there are zones. You're allowed to do whatever the permitted uses are in those zones. But for instance, the Lawrence Street, St. James Street, and there's a fairly large section of town. It's about a third of the town, actually. There is this overlay zone. Squire Street's part of it, some of Weldon Street. And it basically says if you're going to build there, you're allowed to build, but you need to build up at a certain height. We've used a slightly different approach, so that's an actual for any kind of flooding. The potential, we recognize the potential for flooding is there. It's not just a sea level rise zone, which we have in other jurisdictions, but it's a just general flooding recognition on that. And that's all based on LiDAR data and an analysis of the elevation. So people can't, apply to be zoned out of the flood zone. You are where you are, and it's basic geography of that. So you need to adapt your standards there. The building code, in New Brunswick, we deal with, I think it's the 2010 building code we're working on right now. There is a 2015 that's in the works somewhere, but it has not been approved and adopted in New Brunswick. I don't know what the flood pieces are. I don't know the building code, so I really can't speak to that at all if anyone else wants to. I'm not sure. I can't answer that one. It does make sense though. So in Sackville's rules specifically are you can't have an opening in a habitable space above a certain elevation. So your garage, you can build that in a floodplain if you want, but when it comes to basement apartments, if you happen to be in the floodplain, no way, that they won't be permitted. So we balance it that way. Does anybody, that's good enough? Okay, just one, Lori.
Jamie, with the investment on Lawrence Street, you know, with the, like the pond is in, do you anticipate different development on Lawrence Street, or is all the, you know, this cost to do with mitigate the existing flooding? So is there an anticipation of different development on Lawrence Street? I mean, that would be my question.
Yeah, thanks, Lord. That's a really good question. I think oftentimes municipalities will undertake major investments like this with the idea that you'd be able to recover some of those costs through increased economic activity with new building permits, et cetera. But in our case, I don't think anyone's anticipating a building boom on Lawrence Street. The LiDAR data is what it is, and as Tracy said, it's not. You can't make an application to town council to come out of the floodplain. So it will still be a low area even after the infrastructure is renewed. So this is purely an adaptation project where we realize the area is low. It's the bottom of the drainage basin for that whole area of our community, and we need to be able to manage the stormwater. So it's clearly a climate change and stormwater adaptation project, no doubt about it.
Who defines the floodplain or where it is?
Who defines the floodplain?
Yeah, does the province do it, or
No.
the municipality, or
Well,
federal government?
if there's a municipality, it's through the municipal mapping system. So in Southeast, we use LiDAR data. We have LiDAR data for all of our municipalities. And so we will look at that. We're in the process of looking at it. So Sackville's unique. It has this, it's hydrographic layer. We don't have that for most of the municipalities yet, but we're working on it. What we do have for almost all the municipalities is the coastal flooding risk. So all of that is now being mapped, and we will define lines basically, and then those overlay zones in those areas. Once we have the inland flood risk areas mapped, again, it's all done through LiDAR. So that stuff is just being processed right now, and there's all sorts of very intense calculations that are going on through Serge's colleagues at UDAM. They are figuring out a way to calculate where the most areas most at risk. Once we have those, a municipality is the one that will decide to implement those standards on their mapping systems. In the rural areas, because heaven knows while there's municipalities, there's a lot of unincorporated areas, that becomes a provincial decision through a provincial regulation. Yes.
I've been very much enjoyed the sessions this morning. My name is Tim Borlace, and I'm with the Red Dot Association of Sheen. So my question is an open one, and it is how it seems to me that there are a lot of the public are quite well informed on some of the topics we had this morning. How do we, have you got any tips on how we inform decision makers, people that make regulation, and and how do we get them engaged? I guess is my question.
Okay, so we want to look at how do we engage decision makers at the local level and at the provincial level.
At the provincial level, yeah.
Okay, I'm just going to pass the link along.
Have you had any success stories?
So I'll try to be quick, Tim. So first of all, it's having sessions like this. We have elected officials from the Communauté de Beau-Bassin. We have elected officials from Kapiti here. We're supposed to have some from Petitcodiac. They're in this room today. So that's a start. The elected officials come to these type of events. The NGOs are your next level. So the EOSs and the collaborations, because they're there, and they have people from communities that might have influential roles at municipalities and whatnot. And they've been there for a while. They start from the grassroots, and then they become a resource that's credible. That's what I think. And and more, I think municipalities, enjoy more collaborating and letting the NGOs run with contacting the people and doing the stuff and then giving back feedback. And then you have your champions up here, I'm not counting myself, but from the local area that live here. So Jamie lives here, Amanda lives here, and they're part of the NGOs. Jamie works for the town of Sangerville, just in case you didn't know. So having these champions will help. So it's people you know also, and the collaboration is the other thing. It's you need to start from somewhere and try to get a committee together and working on just discussing, starting small term and working like that. It's unfortunate that sometimes as engineers, our first goal, some people might think, is to pave the world. And then you have an environmentalist who say, let's just not change a single thing. But we need to meet in the middle, and really it's to work together, better understand where we come from and where the others come from. Discussion, collaboration, that's my view.
I guess I could just add to that, the Department of Environment's been very supportive of these naturalized stormwater ponds, and they've been actively involved in coming out to Winnipeg with us and meeting with the City of Moncton to try to figure out how can they reduce any regulation obstacles that could be in the way of providing incentives for that to go forward. So there's definitely been a lot of staff engagement there and support for that process as well.
It actually feels really good to answer this question, because I think here in Sackville we have had a lot of success. I know Amanda has had a lot of success with the Environmental Trust Fund applications, not just for Sackville, but for the entire Tantramar region. So certainly EOS has the ear of government, I think, to a certain degree. Also, I know I'm very fortunate to have two of my councillors here, Councillor Evans and Councillor Megan Mitten. So I have support in the room, which I think is support at the staff level, and we're also fortunate to have some DMO representatives here too, with the two mics at the back of the room. But getting funding, getting 50% federal funding for Lawrence Street is huge. Another 25% from the province, but that's just on the flood side. When we look at climate change, it's more than just flooding. Today's topic is flood risk, but I'm looking out the window and I'm looking at the emergency closure gate for the Trans-Canada Highway. It's a huge project. Closing the Tantramar Marsh when the weather is at its best is not an easy thing to do with two provinces, two different ministers, all these different departments. It's a fiasco, and we had a fiasco and we worked through it, but we all came to the table at New Brunswick and Nova Scotia at the staff level, and to a certain degree at the political level, and finally put a procedure in place on how to close the bloody highway when you need to keep people safe. So there was a major infrastructure investment to make that happen, and that's just one example. I could go on, but I think we have certainly had a lot of success here, with the provincial and federal government.
Okay, I don't know if I can add a lot. You guys have already said all the good, right things. But as EOS, I think I always just try to say, whether it's local government or provincial government or who, that we're here to help. And sometimes we get to bring some funding along with us, or we can partner on something, and that makes it better. But we're here to help, and we're here to pick up pieces that governments can't do, don't have the time to do, or the resources to do. So we like to fill in the blanks. We definitely make a point of making the public events advertised to councillors, to officials. So it's great to have you guys in the room today. Same with MLA, same with federal government as well. We take whatever opportunities we can to get in front of those folks, and so that they know about us, and just work together. And even though we may see things a little bit differently, it just comes down to being able to chat and connect and find a way to work together, and we come up with better solutions in the end.
Yeah, I guess I would also just emphasize what's already been said, but definitely along kind of the line of collaboration, which we talked about a lot, and kind of working together on solutions and identifying that, yeah, we all come from different mindsets and worldviews about certain things, but I think that there is a lot of middle ground that can be gained when we do take the time to do collaboration and do it well. So I think, yeah, it's a lot about, and some of the successes I think we've had is reaching out and saying, what is it you need, and kind of what Amanda was talking to, and saying, what is it you need, and what can we do to help, and what are the gaps, and how can we kind of work together to fill those, and what yeah, kind of identifying those strategies together as opposed to in isolation and then trying to bring it all together at the end. So I think that that's a big component, and I think that, again, emphasizing the role that I think events like this play as part of Nature and Beast project, as part of the broader kind of Maritime Natural Infrastructure Collaborative. We worked with the New Brunswick Environmental Network to host a conference last year called the Smart Ship Summit on some of these topics around climate change. We had a day, the second day, that was focused on adapting to climate change, working with nature, that this type of idea, and there's a lot of engagement around that from a lot of different sectors and different departments at different levels of government and NGO and academics. And so I think that the more opportunities that we get to sit down and kind of have conversations together and identify a path forward collaboratively, I think that's where it really lies, the power and all this. That's great.
So I think that's actually a really nice way to end the session, because I got a chance to speak, but it really is all about the collaboration. I just have one more thing to speak before we wrap up. So speaking of collaboration, apparently, so we're not the only one, but we're one of the few environmental collaboratives that's been recommended for a project that's being undertaken at Brock University. So there's a student there who's actually looking at how the power of collaboration, environmental collaborations, and how they work. And her name is Alison Feist. She's actually got a survey that is going to be, I believe, sent around to members of the collaborative. So Amanda's list is like 80 or 90 people. And if it's all right, I think we'll send it out to you as well. It's up to you whether or not you respond to it or not. But it really is about how the collaborative works, and how it's been effective, and how we've made changes because we've worked together. So anyway, just keep your eyes open for that as it comes down. And I want to thank very much the panel here for taking some more time.
Thanks, Tracy and panel. You're allowed to get up. Just for a wrap up, so the next steps, there's always a question of what's the next steps after a meeting like this. The steering committee will meet probably in the next little while. We're probably going to plan an annual event next year again. In general, we keep people up to date and network. So if you're interested in staying in touch, let Amanda know, sign up.